Thank you for tuning in to the Student Organization Summit. Make sure to follow us on social media and check out the many other videos on this channel about working with and advising student organizations. And now, please enjoy your workshop. Hi there, and welcome to our workshop on creating an involvement calculator. So my name is Adam Daniels. I'm from the University of California Riverside. So here's how this workshop's going to go. We're going to talk a little bit about this survey that we created called the Involvement Calculator. We're going to talk about the questions that it makes up. We're going to talk about why we ask those questions. And then we're going to flip and then look at the report that our staff create to send someone, these recommendations of what involvement opportunities they should take advantage of. Then after we cover both of those, we'll talk about assessment a little bit, what we've done, and then challenges, successes to the project. Now, if you have any questions about this as we're going, if you're watching this live, I'll be in the chat on YouTube, and so you can ask text questions and I will answer. Or at the very end of this, we're going to have a Q&A room, which you can find in your schedule, and we can chat about it there if you have more questions. So let's dive in. To start us off, I wanted to give a brief overview of the University of California Riverside and what our campus is like. We have just over 25,000 students consisting of both undergrads and graduates. It's an incredibly diverse campus with over 500 student organizations. We manage all of these groups on our engagement platform, Engage. Now about our survey that we call the Involvement Calculator. Our survey includes a lot of questions. We're going to break down the questions we ask and what we're hoping to get from the students' responses. First, we ask for their school-affiliated email address and their student ID number. The email is so we can send them a report back, and their ID number is in case we ever wanted to go in and look up the student. In terms of assessment, your platform may be capable of checking membership rosters. So being able to look up a student and actually see if they took any of your advice to heart would be useful. We also ask for their full name, again to help with communication and looking up the student later. We ask about their residence. Are they living on campus or off? If they're on campus and they're interested in student government, we might recommend the Residence Hall Association, where we wouldn't offer that to commuter students, which we have a lot of. We also ask about their class standing and if they're a transfer student or not. This can help us make recommendations, but it also helps with tracking how many transfer students filled out the survey versus traditional first years, for example. On this page of the survey, we also ask questions about identity, which includes their cultural interests, religious interests, and gender identity. We ask an open-ended question about cultural interests, so they can self-identify with whatever that means for them. For religion and belief sets, we provided a checklist of belief sets that we have organizations for, but also gave an open-ended box for them to say anything else that may apply. And lastly, we asked them about gender identity. We didn't used to include this, but it does help us narrow down men's and women's sports clubs, fraternities and sororities, and other gendered organizations such as Society of Women Engineers. This does get tricky when they say something like, please don't recommend single gender organizations, but then later express interest in our fraternity and sorority life, or an athletics group. So then we end up recommending all the options. Our survey is 2 pages, so that wraps up the first page on demographics and identity. The second page is more interest-based. We start by asking about their past experiences, either in high school or at a community college. What sorts of things did they do? We don't always recommend these, but it may give you some ideas if the rest of the survey is pretty empty. We also include if they played athletics before. They may be interested in club sports or intramurals based on those sports. We then ask a pretty big question. What other sorts of activities/hobbies would you be interested in while attending UCR? This gives them an option to outright say something they're looking for. They might list a specific club. I heard about the Nigerian Student Association, I want to join that. Or I know that I want to learn chess. I want to do community service. This is our most helpful field and likely the first recommendations we'll give. Now, I gave an example just then of I want to do community service. That's good to know, but it's hard to make a recommendation. So we asked a follow-up. a question we added just a few years ago. We decided to ask them what kind of service they wanted to do. If they say they want service revolving around helping the homeless, that will lead to very different clubs than tutoring children, for example. This helps you narrow a big pool down. We also did the same strategy with causes and politics. If they say they're interested in activism, that's not super helpful. Activism about race, about the environment, about labor unions. Here they can specifically name the causes they're interested in to help us give solid recommendations. We then ask them about their interest in fraternities and sororities. We list options for single-gender groups, co-ed professional groups, and co-ed service organizations, of which we have a few with Greek letters. Like I said, sometimes their answer with gender is helpful here, and sometimes not. You could always simplify this question and ask them directly if they're interested in social fraternities, for example, then also list social sororities and let them self-identify. Up next, we ask about their major and career path. This is an easy recommendation if there's a club based on their major or possible profession. But sometimes their answer is not helpful. For example, if they list biology, we don't have any biology clubs, but we've got pre-med, pre-vet, research clubs. Just saying biology doesn't help us. So this question can go either way. Most of the time, this is incredibly useful. Now that they've been answering some questions, we give them another opportunity to list anything they want, any interest that might help us make recommendations. And then we wrap up with them listing a priority. We let them choose 3 out of 6 possible options. Sometimes this never comes up because we might struggle to make a handful of good recommendations, especially if the student didn't put any effort into their survey. But sometimes the student might list so many things that we need to reference this as a place to start. The survey that we send them, which we'll get to in a second, should only be a small batch of the best recommendations. So if there's potentially a dozen or more clubs that might make sense, maybe you can use their priorities to narrow down that list. This can also be a troublesome question, though. Surprisingly often, they'll prioritize something that they didn't list anything about. They'll say academics should be the top focus, but they skipped the question about their major. They'll say fraternities and sororities, but they said to not recommend single-gender clubs. Their priorities here often contradict the rest of the survey, so that can be frustrating. So now that they've completed their survey, they submit it to us, then we now just have all these forms to look at. And so let me explain what our process for maybe intake looks like. Our team, there are 3 of us, pro staff only, that complete these reports. So I traditionally go through them and split out who should be completing what, sometimes based on specialty or if a student is especially interested in academic groups, I might send to the advisor that works primarily with academic groups. You could do that, or you could just randomize, if all of your advisors are super well equipped to talk about every club, you could totally do that too. But we needed an easy way to look up a club's information. We use Engage as a platform, but that's not the easiest to copy and paste from. And you'd be searching and browsing all the different pages. It would take a while. So we created a Google Doc that all of us can collaborate and share and edit kind of in real time. And so this Google Doc we all have access to, and then we're responsible for updating as clubs deactivate, brand new clubs start, things like that. So let's look at that document. On the document, you'll see every club that we have. We update this list whenever clubs deactivate or when new clubs start up. We copy and paste their description that they write from their page. We use Engage as a platform. The name, if you click on it, leads to their profile page there, where the student can then initiate contact. Now, there is some cleaning up to do here, because just copying and pasting the descriptions that they write isn't always ideal. They may not be complete sentences. There might be spelling mistakes, or it might just have strange formatting that works on their profile, but doesn't work here. So maybe do a once-over to clean it up. So now, in conjunction with the involvement calculator, we have another way for new people to learn about clubs. And that is a virtual tabling website, which is essentially 300 clubs have created commercials that students can go and look at and actually hear from the club themselves about what the club does and why they should join. So we wanted a way to reference that when we were, creating their involvement calculator report. So on the spreadsheet here, we added a sentence to every group that has a commercial on our virtual tabling site. So it'll point people to that site to hear from the groups directly. So now let's pretend that I now have a batch of reports that I'm going to now complete. What does that process look like? So if we're here, sitting at the computer, we're going to look at their report and figure out where to start. We have a template, so I copy and paste that into my email with my intro and outro. Then I add their name. In this case, it's Tyler. I see that they want to be a physician's assistant, or maybe a dentist. I start the report by going to our database and copying and pasting the info for our largest medical fraternity, Phi Delta Epsilon, since he also said he was interested in co-ed professional groups. You can see their entry also includes the link to our virtual tabling website at the end there. I then copy and paste the entries for the American Medical Student Association, Physician Assistants of Tomorrow, and Future Dentist Club. I won't put this on the screen here, but you can also go into other interests such as tennis and badminton and include those clubs as well. At the end of the email, our footer is always the same, pointing to our Engage platform and our department website, then offering to meet with them if they want to talk about the recommendations we've given. It's rare, but sometimes folks want help actually approaching these groups, or they want to discuss starting a group if nothing for their interest shows up. So you may be thinking, this sounds like a cool idea, but it is a completely manual process, which means it's a bit of time. So you could potentially on your campus train student staff to be completing these. You can have your front desk staff. You can have, I know some of you have like involvement consultants. You can have your students do these reports, but there's a reason we didn't. And that is that our advisors, we are much more knowledgeable of all of the clubs and maybe the quality of clubs that we should be recommending. Because there might be clubs that are active, right? They've met all the requirements, they're on the website. But if we're, taking a very select number of groups to recommend, there's some groups that may not make the cut, right? That if we're going to say this student wants to be pre-med and they're looking for clubs, there might be a few clubs that are like, they're not really doing much, either normally or in these COVID times, right? They're not really a solid recommendation, or I know that they're going through a lot of challenges right now, so I'm not going to recommend them. So we have that insight where your student staff, if they're just browsing and saying, here's the clubs that come up with these keywords, they may not be able to curate the list as well. Your students also may have to search and say, okay, what are all of our dentistry clubs? Where, like me, for example, if someone says, I want to, go into dentistry, I can immediately go to that Google Doc and say, here's the clubs that I'm going to copy and paste. I don't need to look them up on Engage. I don't need to kind of say, who am I going to suggest? Like, I immediately know which clubs should be recommended, where your students, it might take them longer to do a report because each thing they're having to search and figure out which clubs to even look up on the Google Doc. So let's look at how our summer of 2020 played out. We received over 500 submissions, whereas last summer I believe we were around 300. So being virtual could have been a huge contributing factor. About a third of those submissions were from incoming transfer students, who maybe knew that they were already looking to find opportunities. We were able to turn around results in about 5 days from submission, which isn't too bad, and we had 3 of our full-time staff complete the reports as they came in. So this whole process, this is just what we do at the University of California Riverside. I've consulted with a lot of other campuses that have wanted to do something like this, and there's other ways. So I talked about training your students to do this. That's one way. There are ways to do this in person, so having drop-in hours where students can come and just talk to someone, but it's just different ways to collect this information, right? So a student sitting down and saying, I want to join a pre-dentistry club, is the same as filling out the form and saying those things. So they could do it in person with someone to talk to. You could do a in-person form at like tabling fairs where they can say, I filled out the form, what club should I go talk to? And it's almost more of a, these 3 clubs are here, go talk to them. You can do something like that. I've seen that happen. But the general gist of getting a student to self-identify what they want, but then, curating that list and saying, here's the best options for you. This can be done a lot of different ways. This is just how we do it. In terms of assessment, we do annual assessments probably about mid-year, winter, because we know that people completing it over the summer and throughout early fall, they then need time to actually look up those groups and maybe start attending meetings, because we want to know if they actually joined these clubs, if they're going to pursue those opportunities. So surveying them right after they take the assessment probably won't reveal too much. So we need to kind of figure out that sweet spot of how long after would they have an idea if their results really helped them make those decisions. In terms of the results of those assessments, it's always positive. There's the occasional people that are upset that they wanted something that doesn't exist here. And so then we'll tell those people you can always start a club, but they maybe think there's not enough options, which we have no control over. But most people are really happy and positive with the sort of curation of that list and recommendations for them. And most people end up pursuing at least one of the things recommended to them. So for us, the results have been incredibly positive. But with that process that we do, I did want to share some of the challenges, especially over the last couple of years, that we've seen. We haven't had many challenges, but these are the ones that caused us to stumble a bit recently. Firstly, students don't always fill out the form completely. So you might get submissions, like I referenced earlier, that don't include vital information, or they don't give you enough to even offer any recommendations. An obvious challenge is that this manual process can be a time burden, especially if you're already incredibly busy when incoming students might be most interested in this. And lastly, keeping the database of orgs up to date, we have to set reminders when we finish registering new groups or when we deactivate any groups to also remove them from this database, so we're not recommending groups that are no longer active. So I think that's pretty much it. We gave you an idea what our survey looks like. We gave you an idea what sort of our template report looks like. So if you want to talk, if you're watching this live, I'm going to be leaving here to go hop into that Zoom room. So if you want to come join me, ask questions, get feedback, tell me about what your campus does, I'd love to talk with you. If you're watching this video after the fact, you can comment and we'll try to answer, or you can email. My information will be up on the screen here in a second. And hopefully you found some of this useful. Thanks for tuning in to the Student Organization Summit. If you're watching this live, feel free to reference the schedule for the day and use the link in the schedule to access a Q&A room where you can ask questions or chat with the presenters from this workshop. If they didn't list a Q&A link, or you're watching this video after the event, thank you for your interest in the Student Organization Summit.